Hey everybody, Gromulus here with another simulator battle video. And this time I have a first for me when it comes to simulator battles, and that is that this video is not from an event, but from the normal queue. I usually prefer events over the normal queue, and I have explained often why. However, when I play events I often end up playing lower rank planes, and I got a lot of requests to fly more higher rank planes in my videos. So I figured I start doing that, and since I recently unlocked a few higher rank props in the German tree, I will start with the Germans. Of course, you can never know in advance what planes will be available in the next event, so I will use fights from the normal queue most of the time when I make a video about a specific plane. Now, in this video I will fly the Focke-Wulf 90 D-9, so let's talk real quick about the plane. So far I would say that D-9 is in my opinion the overall most capable high-rank prop in the German tree, and of course among the most powerful prop fighters we currently have in the game. Now, why is it that I consider the D-9 the most capable of the German high-rank props and not the D-12, D-13, Ta-152 or the Bf-109s? Well, compared to the D-12 and D-13, the D-9 is slightly less well armed. The D-13 and 12 replace the machine guns with a centerline 2 or 3 cm cannon. Otherwise, the power and weight is comparable. However, the engine of the D-12 and D-13 are optimized for higher altitude, so they will reach the maximum performance higher up than the D-9. The D-9 will reach its maximum performance at somewhat lower altitude, so unsurprisingly, the D-12 and D-13 will outperform the D-9 at higher altitude and the D-9 will outperform them at a lower altitude. Now, since we hardly get any real high altitude scenarios in War Thunder so far, I consider the D-9 the better plane. In the altitude ranges we usually fight at the moment, it is simply the better performing machine. On top of that, it seems it can reach a faster speed in a dive before it redlines. And I feel similar about the Ta-152H compared to the D-9 as well. The Ta is a high altitude fighter, its engine performs best at higher altitude, and the larger wings, which makes the plane a bit heavier, are also built with this in mind because it reduces the wing loading and therefore the performance at higher altitude. They make the plane turn better thanks to the slightly lower wing loading too, but neither of them, the D-9 or the Ta, is a turn fighter, and overall the D-9 performs better at the usual War Thunder combat altitudes in my opinion. But I will of course make a Ta-152 video eventually as well, and take a closer look at how it compares then. So what about the Bf-109? Now, like the 109, the D-9 is of course an energy fighter, but the Bf-109 is still quite a bit lighter and achieves therefore a better power-to-weight ratio at WEP than the D-9, and of course also a bit lower wing loading. So in certain situations the Bf-109 is going to do better when it can engage in a vertical maneuver and energy fighting than the D-9 because of its lower weight and better power-to-weight ratio that allows the plane to maneuver more energy efficient and regain energy fast. However, on the flip side, the Focke-Wulf 90 D-9 is quite a bit faster in level flight, which allows it to build up more energy in the first place before entering a fight. But more importantly, the D-9 is still fast enough to outrun a lot of the opponents in cannon phase, though not all of them, and of course the D-9 is one of the fastest divers in the game, able to break 900 kph in a dive if on sufficient altitude. This gives the D-9 simply a better chance to get away from an unfavorable situation than the Bf-109, which at this rank, at the altitudes we usually fly in War Thunder, is usually slower than its opposition. That just means the D-9 usually has a better survivability. It can energy fight most opponents it will meet if it has the necessary energy to do so, and if someone gets on your tail, you have a good chance to outdive and outrun him, much better than in the Bf-109. And that combination is why I think the D-9 is currently the most effective German high-tier prop. But I of course also plan to make a video about the G6, G10 and K4 Bf-109s, where I go into this in more detail. And as I have said, I just recently unlocked those planes, so in most of the footage in this video the D-9 is not upgraded at all. I just mentioned that because for an energy fighter like the D-9 this does make a big difference. According to the datasheet, which may or may not be somewhat correct in this case, the D-9 gains about 230 horsepower and loses 120 kg in weight from unupgraded to fully upgraded, plus of course aerodynamic improvements, and this will make quite a big difference. Now, since unlocking all modules for those higher rank planes does take a while though, I don't necessarily want to wait till I have everything unlocked before making a video. But don't worry, there will be more videos about the D-9 in the future, which shows it in its fully upgraded state. Well, let's take a look at the fighter 2 in the D-9. Let's start with one on the Battle of Britain map. As I was climbing, I got the notice that the bomber on our team destroyed a few enemy bases, and I know the enemy team gets those messages as well, of course, so I figured they might try to intercept the bomber as it leaves the area, and I dove down to maybe catch one unaware as it goes for the bomber. And indeed I can surprise the Tempest as it climbs after the TOW 217. I get a good hit on the Tempest as I shoot past, which takes part of his wings off. Now, there's a pretty thick cloud cover on this map in this match, so as I climb away I enter the clouds pretty fast. Now, cloud cover is a bit of a double-edged sword when flying a plane like the D-9. In this case I can disappear into the clouds right away after the attack and be hidden from anyone that might have seen it, and I can regain altitude and energy without worrying about being attacked, something you can of course use for your advantage. However, if the cloud cover hangs low enough, you have very little space between it and the ground for vertical maneuvers, which puts you at a disadvantage versus better turning planes that want to draw you into turn fights. Luckily, in this case the cloud cover is sufficiently high to not cause too much problems and leaves enough space to maneuver. Now, as I turn around and exit the clouds again, I can see quite a few planes in the distance on slightly higher altitude, and they are obviously fighting. So I make my way there and hope I can get another surprise attack on an unsuspecting enemy. While they are mostly higher than me at this point, they will also be slower as they are maneuvering, and as I get closer they will lose altitude as they do so. I can spot another plane higher to my right, which would be in a position to attack me, but as I take a closer look I can see that it's the typical shape of a Horton 229, so it is on our team. Shortly after I reach the fight and the Tempest turns around right in front of me, and I can get a shot off and a hit on the Tempest. I go into a bit of a climbing turn after and keep an eye on the Tempest. As he was turning tightly, I suspect he's locked into a turn fight and will continue to turn, giving me an opportunity to attack again. It looks though he was trying to climb after me, so I level out and climb in a straight line. The Tempest of course doesn't have the speed to follow. Then he breaks off and goes into split S and dives away, so I come around and dive after him. The lighting conditions in this match are pretty poor though, and I lose him for a second over the woods. But I find him again to my right as I level out. He is pulling hard to the right, but it seems he is too damaged and goes down. And I can spot another Tempest right in front of me, which I go after. I am fast at this point and I close in fast. However, after I get closer I can soon see that enemy AA is shooting the Tempest, and I already suspect he isn't on the enemy team. And as I get closer it turns out it is indeed a captured Tempest and on my team. Well, you don't get that on event mode. So I pull up and go into a zoom climb, regaining quite a bit of altitude, and look for another target. And I can soon spot enemy tracers below, but I have trouble finding the plane it came from in those lighting conditions. But a second set of tracers, this time friendly to the right, help me pinpoint the location of at least one enemy plane. I can at first see only a Bf-109K4 which fired the tracers, but then I see to the right a Spitfire Mark 16. The Bf-109 seems to be on top of him, so at first I don't want to attack the Spitfire, do not risk a collision with the Bf-109 or a friendly fire incident, and just cover the 109 instead in case another fighter comes in. But the Spitfire fires a burst directly up, which gives me the impression he's firing on a friendly I haven't spotted above, so I decided to attack enemy to not give him the chance to damage an ally. I hit him and so does the K4, and I get an assist. Now, I don't think there really was a friendly plane above, maybe the Spitfire fired its weapons by accident. Now I climb back up, and as I come around I can see for a second two planes below me, apparently one chasing the other, but I lose them again pretty quickly, so I come around and try to find them again. At this point I can see a smoking plane pulling up. It's the friendly Tempest, and since I saw a plane chasing another, I turn after him in case it was the Tempest being chased and the enemy is still behind him, somehow hidden by the smoke. But there isn't an enemy fighter. The Tempest must have been damaged by AAA. It was the 109 that was being chased by a Spitfire, and I missed my opportunity to help out in time. Now I know they were pretty low, so I put my nose down and try to find the Spitfire. I can't see him at first, But as I pull back up, I can spot the Spitfire to my left. He is lower and turning rather tight, so I go up in a loop to come around and attack from above. I should have quite a large energy advantage at this point, and in the vertical it should be no problem keeping it. Now as I dive down again, the Spitfire, which has seen me, pulls up and points the nose at me. However, I'm fairly sure that he does not have the necessary energy to keep his nose pointed up long enough for a head-on. He was too slow for that, so I keep attacking and I get a good hit which takes out his tail controls. And the Spitfire eventually goes down. Now as the fight over the city is over, I move away a bit to regain altitude and cool down my engine. There's only one enemy fighter left on the enemy team, and I don't know where he is. On my team there is me and the Do-217 bomber. After a bit of climbing back to altitude and searching, I do find the plane in the distance pretty low and start moving towards it. I'm not sure at this point if it's a friendly bomber or the enemy fighter. However, as I get closer I can suddenly see a second plane coming in behind the first one, so that must be the enemy fighter going after the bomber. So I throttle up and try to get there as fast as possible. I'm a bit too slow though. However, the Do-217's gunners set the enemy fighter, a Typhoon, on fire and he has to break off his attack. And I follow to finish him off if necessary. At first it looks like the Typhoon is too damaged to stay airborne and won't make it over the trees, so I hold my fire. A mistake as it turns out, because the Typhoon does stay airborne and I miss a good opportunity to take a shot. And I had to break off my first attack. So I pull up and come around in a barrel roll to get back behind the Typhoon and roll in behind him again. Now the Typhoon just keeps flying straight at this point, maybe he is too damaged for maneuvers. My D-9 is of course a lot faster than the Typhoon, so I can catch up at will. I get into fire range pretty quick, but just when I fire my first burst, the Typhoon pushes his nose down and my first salvo misses completely. So I keep attacking and eventually get more and more hits. But I don't have the 20mm belts unlocked, and the armor-piercing rounds seem to be a bit ineffective at this moment. But eventually I do enough damage and the Typhoon goes down. And well, that was the last plane on the enemy team, and this is it for this fight. Let's take a look at another very short engagement in which the D-9 has a few more unlocks, though still not all. Now in this match we are on Britain again, and I approach an enemy fighter in front of me, which is on slightly lower altitude. I at first fly straight at him to build up as much energy as possible before we merge. Now if it would look like he is going for a head-on, I would evade that, but it seems he's not planning on doing so, so I adjust my flight path a bit to try to get the shot as we pass each other, without maneuvering too wildly and losing energy in the process. I don't quite get the shot, and after we pass each other, I just pull gently up and start to climb away. If the Spitfire turns in the horizontal to go after me, this should put it at an energy disadvantage. However, as I look back, the Spitfire is also pointing his nose down and while turning, losing altitude quickly, which gives me a pretty large altitude advantage. So after I loop around, I can go on the offensive right away. I dive after the Spitfire to attack him from above, while building up speed I can use to go back up afterwards. I don't think the Spitfire saw me coming, and I can line up a good shot and take the Spitfire out, and then climb back up while looking around for possible enemies on higher altitude that might be in a position to intercept me as I climb back up. You are after all vulnerable in a zoom climb versus enemies on altitude, as you slow down of course and present an easy target for enemies bouncing in the right moment. Now I can't see any enemies on higher altitude, but I do spot another plane coming this way on lower altitude, so I go loop around and fly over the newcomer and start to dive down behind him. As I dive down, the plane in question turns out to be indeed enemy. It is a Premium Mustang Mark 1A, and I get behind him and I get a few hits in, but nothing critical it seems, and then I zoom back up. Now the Mustang Mark 1A is by the way one of the fastest divers in the game. This is one of the planes you don't want to try to outdive. But of course it is also a bit underpowered on this altitude and will have trouble versus planes with an energy advantage. I don't know how damaged the Mustang is from my attack. At first it seemed it spun out of control, but the pilot recovered from the spin, so I come back down for another attack. At this altitude it is way easier to keep track of targets below you than it is at lower altitude, so I can easily track the Mustang and get back behind him for another burst. this time I got the critical and the Mustang is going down. Now I used the speed I had built up and climbed back up to altitude, leveling out at several hundred meters above the altitude I was on when the fight versus the Spitfire started. Now I just wanted to show you this little fight to show off the capabilities of the plane in the vertical with more upgrades unlocked. The rest of this fight was pretty uneventful. Now overall I have to say I really like this plane. The D-9 performs really well, and I do plan to do more videos about the D-9 in the future, which I hope show off the capabilities of the plane better. Now I would say the later 109s are still a bit better when it comes to energy fighting in the vertical, thanks to their great power to weight ratio, but as I've also said before, they are also slower overall, and in those high rank games are hard pressed to escape when in a tight spot, which is a very important feature, and also not so good at running down enemies that want to disengage from the fight. But I do plan to do BF-109 videos soon as well, featuring the G6, the G10 and the K4, and I will take a closer look at those planes then. Well, and this is it for this video. As always, I hope it was entertaining, thanks for watching, and maybe I'll see you next time.